This is Real Talk, the Customer Insights Show with Jenn Vogel, a top-rated live stream and podcast in the market research and insights industry. We're live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Join Jenn and her guests for this live discussion around topics that will help you understand your customers better. Also available on podcast channels. This live stream is presented to you by Vox Pop Me, the leader in video research and ranked #1 in qualitative research by Grit 2 years running. Here's today's live conversation.
Hello, insights professionals, marketers, and everyone who wants to understand their customers better. I'm Jenn Vogel. Making the best use of technology, especially market research technology, can make our lives so much easier and help us drive results. So in today's episode, I'm joined by Raj Manocha. He's the CEO at Methodify and a dear friend, and I'm looking forward to diving into that topic further with him. Welcome, Raj. So excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to an amazing session.
Amazing session. Absolutely. Just a warning to everyone listening out there. We have a newly minted kindergartner in the house today. I'm not 100% sure he won't make a guest appearance. So just in case, he might come and say hi to you, Raj.
I'm okay with that. Let's bring it on.
I don't know if he'll have any amazing market research questions for you, but we'll see. So maybe just to kick off, tell our listeners a little bit about you and a little about Methodify.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Raj Manocha. I've been in the industry for about 16 years now. Work at a company called Methodify, so I'm the CEO there. Essentially what we do is we focus on research automation. So basically, if we think about the research process, what parts of your process can we automate to make it quicker and much more seamless? So while we're a research tech company, we also look for more of a user experience play when it comes to research and basically trying to figure out how to turn research that used to be 6 to 8 weeks old into 1 or 2 days. What we try to do is basically take different technologies, stitch them all together, layer them so you have this opportunity to create great research, get great feedback. That's one of the reasons we're also partners with Vox Pop Me on a bunch of stuff as well. So we're looking for best of breed technology stuff, and we like to just play around with different things, all in the sort of vein of helping the industry move forward.
That's awesome. And I like that topic of just making things faster and automating. And obviously it's a need that like all of our customers have and in the insights space. But one of the things that I know I've been hearing in my conversations with people in the industry is like this fear that speed is going to impact quality. Like, what's your position on that?
It absolutely is for a lot of things. So I think there's a time and a place. And I think too many times in the industry, we basically tell a story that we think should apply to everybody. And I think it's about having the right tools in your toolkit. So whether it is that full service sort of thing you want to go to and you go to the more traditional firms to get that piece done, or coming to companies like ours or yours, anybody else's, where it's about that quick turn research. So it's about having the right tool for the right project. And I think sometimes that message gets lost. So I think it's about balance. And so we're in this really interesting time in the industry where you have so many choices. And so as an insights professional, the real value for you now is to pick what tool actually makes the most sense to get the data back that your company needs, not just to have all this stuff and use it all the time. So I think everyone always talks about how automation might replace the researcher. It's the opposite. The researcher now has to be even more powerful to understand what tool to use when and what's going to bring value when.
I totally agree. And I think that's something that's come up too in other conversations. I think it was a few months back, I was speaking to Kari Campbell from L'Oreal, and he was talking about this idea of risk and rigor and like how much effort and resource you put behind a particular research project based on the risk involved with getting that answer wrong, right? Like there are certain things you can afford to, maybe not have the quality that you wanted or not spend the amount of time because you're looking for a quick pulse on something. And then other things that, like you say, you do want to invest more in.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I have a colleague, Ryan Crawford in the Toronto office, who has this lineup called below the line research. And so what automation really lets you do is do research on stuff you probably wouldn't have done or what you couldn't afford in the past. I think that's a big sort of recognition of what automation actually brings to the table. It's, a lot of times that insights professional might get challenged by the marketer, the CMO, the product leader, that it's too slow, it's too costly. Now you have all these tools to do research in places where you never could have done in the past. We have one company who every time they would sort of adjust their website or their app, they would adjust the wireframes, and the developers never got feedback because they wanted to go so quickly. But now there's a lot of methodologies out there where the developers are actually the ones doing the research work. I mean, can you think of a time in the past where that would have happened, right? So automation lets you as a company, particularly if you're an insights professional, get your tentacles in in different spots that you probably wouldn't have been in the past. And I think that's the real power, that insights becomes more transformative across the organization, not just in a silo. And that's what really we're trying to get to. And I think a lot of companies are in the automation space. How does the insights professional have more power across the organization versus just in their own plays?
Sure. Yeah. It really helps with, like you say, like it's such an iterative process for product development or for creative. And there's so many opportunities that get missed for research to be involved if you're using, if you're not leveraging the automation that's available. But that really allows you to get more iterative and get some quick pulses where, like you said, you wouldn't have devoted any time to research in the past.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like you brought up before about the sphere, right? How many, like a really good company will say no to things that just don't make sense. And we've started to get into that mindset as well. I think a lot of these automation firms or research technology firms, and I will not say ResTech because I think that's the stupidest word in the world, but research technology firms, basically it's how do you approach a client with actually your sweet spot. And I think a lot of times at the beginning of a lot of companies, you take on what you can because you got to build your brand, you got to get the logos on. Not always the right thing, but everyone understands the revenue challenge. But realistically, what we're trying to get to as the market matures is about saying yes to the right things, because then it also gives the insights professional an understanding of where to use this stuff. And it's not just about everything, it's about the right thing. And not enough companies are saying no, and that is causing a problem for a lot of automation firms or research technology firms, because you get lumped into this, oh, I had a bad experience. And it's because we've created the dynamic where we're saying yes to the wrong things.
That's really interesting. So I was going to kind of go into this next question I have for you about, like, we're talking about choosing the right moments, right? Or the right methodologies or right technologies to solve a specific problem. So I was going to, ask, like, how do you choose? But you bring up an interesting point there about where is the onus on the technology provider to help guide that as well. So maybe I'll add that as a sub question of, how do you know when it's the right time to use this particular type of tech?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm not going to get on my soapbox too much about venture capitalists and PE and money and how it's sort of impacting everybody. But there are almost 800 different companies in the space. And there's about $16.5 billion. And that's like back of the napkin math in terms of the space being spent. If you're an insights professional, can you imagine the amount of emails you are getting constantly, daily, from these people trying to sell you on something? And they are going to just want to get you on board, pilot something, do something. And they tell you about, if you do this is what's going to happen, right? So everyone gets very interested and they want to do these things and they're freebies and all this stuff. But if it goes wrong, it has a bad taste in the mouth for the insights professional, and then they're going to say yes to less and less things. As an industry, we do ourselves a disservice because we're trying to get logos, trying to get revenue, because we're trying to balance the investors as well. It's not just about the technology, but if you're invested by a venture capital group or a PE group, you have to have a run rate. You have to do a bunch of other things to get you there. And that lets you make the wrong decisions. So I think what ends up happening in the challenge or the balance is that this industry, we want to grow, we want to get more money in the space, we want to build these amazing technologies, but not at the cost of the clients. And I think sometimes, particularly in the last, I'd say 24 months, you're seeing this disparity of use cases actually being right versus just use cases. And so I think that'll change over time, but we're in the infancy of what this is as well. And I think it's, as an insights professional, you have to be okay with that gray area, but not to the point where it's going to ruin your reputation or the ask you have internally.
Well, that's a lot for somebody who wasn't going to get out of soapbox, but but I guess what I was gonna ask, I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I am hearing a mommy from the other room, but I'm trying to get back on track here. What this is reminding me of is actually like a bunch of years ago, customers coming to technology companies or to even full service agencies going, I want to run a mobile study. Well, why? It's because that's the buzzword, because that's what people are talking about. That's like the newest tech. So I want to use it, not because it solves the industry problem. Hello, this is Charlie Vogel. He's wanting my attention right now, but we are live on the air, so we are going to roll with this.
We got this.
Yeah, we got this. So, I mean, I guess it is really important that companies are thinking about well, what problem am I trying to solve and what technology or methodology is going to help me solve that problem?
Yeah, exactly. Plus, I love the new name. I think
I
that's
love that.
sense.
Kudos to our producer acting on the fly. Thanks, Christoph.
Awesome. I think it really, it's interesting time because we've had the most complex problems we've ever had in the industry as well, right? We have this ideas of sort of mixed method pieces, or you have marketing mixes where you're trying to figure out things like TV and online and mobile, and you got a lot of companies who has very, very difficult problems, and the problem is that there's no one solution. So I think this idea of layering technology. So for example, whether it's us bringing on companies like yourself or partnering with Zappy or Quantiloop or Qualtrics, like more and more sort of these high-end, high-level engagement pieces require multiple technologies to solve some sort of unique problem. So it's more about, can you play connector? Can you all play in the same sandbox? Because these companies really don't care if it's you or anybody else. They want a solution. So I think as an industry, we're becoming more challenged to figure out how to work together. And that's why you're seeing this rise of APIs and more of these sort of open source things and more agnostic plays. I mean, that's a big belief for us as well. It's about agnostic. We're not trying to sell some sort of solution to you. We need to get you to kind of get the solution that's going to fit your problem and get your solution. So I think if the industry itself focuses more on the client solution versus just how do we sell more of our own thing, we'll be in a better spot, because if we can empower the insights professional, we're going to get more spend. The more wins we can get, the more use cases we get that are right, the budgets are going to increase. We've seen that from even our clients, and I know a lot of my colleagues along the line have seen the exact same thing. So I don't think that's going to change. We need to do the right things.
Yeah, I think you're totally right that this idea that collaboration is the new competition, right? We are all playing in the same space, and if there's been a big shift over several years of all research being done for me as an insights professional to me doing a lot of research myself. So in that transition, there's a lot of parts and pieces to pull together. And the more technology providers can work together to help make that easier for the user, like the better results everybody's going to have.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point about this being done for me, because I think what we're seeing as well in this pendulum shift is a lot of corporate brands like the DIY system, but they need that full service at the end, right? So you're going to get this white glove service on top of DIY. And I think you're going to see a lot of these research technology companies actually transform into research houses driven by technology, not just tech companies, but full service companies driven by tech. So I think you're going to see in the next sort of 5 years, a big shift. You'll see a lot of M&A in terms of folks getting scooped up to create these sort of behemoth companies that are actually solving things but around technology, but have 20% of their work staff being researchers. So I think that'll be a big shift for a lot of these companies, because it's still good work, and I think it's going to challenge the folks who've been at the top for a very long time. So think of the Kantars, the Ipsos, the Nielsen's, to rediscover what made them amazing, which was basically they were at the forefront of all these sort of, whether it was methodologies or products or people or all those types of things. We're going to have this big renaissance of sort of challenging when it comes to, what does research actually mean now? Is it tech driven? Is it about the people? Is it both? Right now you have fine lines between sort of this research tech group and these traditional groups, but that's going to change too. So it'll be a very curious time over the next 5 years to see where that actually goes.
Yeah, that is an interesting prediction, because at the same time as you're seeing a lot more services being offered by tech firms, you're also seeing a lot of full service agencies being built internally at these brands. Yeah. So it's like, they're trying to solve the same problem essentially, where what you end up with is a marketplace with such a spectrum of people who want to be DIY and are equipped to do so, and people who either don't want to at all or just don't have the resource.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And we've seen this in from research that you've seen in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and to now. You've seen this pendulum, right? Build up your internal resource, and then we're going to do everything inside. Now it's extended outside. We're not going to have any staff. And so if you see this funny thing, and it tends to be a lot around what CMO you have in your shop. Some of them love to get partnerships. Some of them love to build internally. And if you have a really strong head of insights who can control that narrative as well, that's really important. But you see the shift, and I think it's going to be interesting to see as companies, how do we balance the two things, right? Because we also know every tech doesn't just stop when the research part of your side is done. They need someone to translate that actual data. And if they have no internal, what do you do? Because you don't want to lose that client. So how do you close that actual story? If they have an internal group, that's great, but they want some extra love on that side as well. So as a company, also, where are you investing your resources? Do you want to partner with a research firm to kind of do that stuff? Do you want to bring in consultants who can research? Do you have to hire them on? And if you're a tech company, you don't really want to do that because you're trying to get them on sort of the SaaS play. It's not a service play, right? So it's a very complex thing for the industry that I think some companies have sort of figured out, some haven't. But I think a lot of us will be challenged in the next sort of 5 or 10 years in terms of who we want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this feels like we could spend a lot of time just talking about that. And this sort of balance of full service, DIY, technology, and storytelling of data. Like there's so much change that's happening. But maybe we'll refocus on technology. Fair. Next time we'll talk more about the other stuff. But I guess how would you recommend that insights professionals identify which specific technology is going to meet their needs in the moment?
It's a great question, Jen. So I think a couple things. One, education has never been more prevalent because of things like COVID. There's been more resources, right? So even the stuff you are actually producing, I think super helpful because people can find out from folks what's interesting, what's not, what's important, what's not. You got other resources like Quirks, you got Green Book, you got TMRE. Those events are all coming up. The fall schedule has a lot of great content that's either being presented by different folks from a corporate side or just sort of white papers or webinars or articles that are happening sort of every week. It's important to get your base down. Then I think it's about discovery. So I think a lot of times it's important to either just sort of have conversations with folks about what they're doing, how it applies to you. But you don't think it's too deep, but you should kind of get your pulse on the industry, which is really important. And there's a lot of events to actually do that. And it's important to sort of get your vision right. So if you're the head of insights and you're saying, okay, in 2 or 3 years, I want my group to look like this, or I want our process to look like this, start to map it out. Start to think about what you want to accomplish and what you're trying to get to. And that also ties back into your corporation or your company in terms of what are you measured on? How do you look at your customer base? Is it about efficiency? Is it about speed? Is it about cost? All those things will drive the way your vision works. And if you get it right, it's perfect. But once you start to get that stuff on a piece of paper, you can start to talk to the folks who actually can help you figure out how to get to that end state. And that might be things like video, audio, transcription, automation, AI, all these beautiful things that are out there. There's a ton of technology, but it comes down to building the right research technology stack for you, not that everyone else has. And it's about what you're trying to solve for, not what you hear about. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is people hear these great stories or these great case studies. They want to mimic that, but at the challenge of what their company is. And that's not always going to work. Sometimes you're trying to fit a square peg into a circular hole versus what you should try to accomplish for your own company.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot. And some of that is, like very well intentioned, wanting to learn from the best out there. And there are some really incredible researchers out there who are more than happy to share like how they've found success. But you're right, like having a deep understanding of what your business needs are and tailoring that is, I think, that's where a lot of people struggle. Because as you said before, there's like 800 pieces of tech out there to choose from. So, how do I know? And a lot of it is new, right? It's new to the researchers. It's new to the market. It might be totally new methodologies. So not only am I taking a risk by trying a new piece of technology, but I'm also trying to create a mix of technology that, I think is the best for me, is going to solve my problems, but nobody's ever done that mix before. Like it's all so new, which I think, as we talk through it, it makes sense why the industry kind of is slow to move forward in these ways, because there's a lot of risk in getting it wrong in some cases, and it's all very new to people.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. I think part of, as an industry, what we haven't embraced is that trying things and failing is okay. There's learning in a lot of things, right? And I think as a head of insights or an insights manager or whatever your role is, you have to be comfortable with dipping your toe in and it's freezing water. Like it's okay for it not to work. Just don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like try things out, pilot things. You have to learn from stuff. And I think it's about small wins first that are going to demonstrate the value of a product. And then you can expedite that stuff and get bigger and get larger. But don't, just because you're at a case study or you read the last Gartner report and you want to sort of do these things, that's not the right reason either, right? It's about what applies, get the right case, get the right pilot for you, get the right learning, but be very clear about your outcomes, right? If you just say, I wanted to get this and I want to get to the state, between you and this end state are probably 7 or 8 different checkpoints. get specific on each one of those things, figure out sort of what's a win for your company, and tell your vendor that, or your partner that. The more they know about what you're looking for and sort of what that win state is going to look like for your internal stakeholders is really important, because they can guide you about what's the best process, or maybe that's not the right company or fit. So the more you can share, the better for these companies, because we want to put you in good states, but we need to have information.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's like, understanding what your goals are. I think that the freedom to fail, I think it is becoming a little bit more prevalent. I hear more people talk about that in a way that's like, we need to be able to fail in order to move forward and to find success. And so I think that's a great move for the industry if more people can adopt that mindset. And I love what you said about like, mapping out the long-term vision for where you want to get to, and then measuring those small wins to get there, like taking the baby steps. I think sometimes it's visualizing the end state that becomes overwhelming. And it's like, well, how are we going to get there? Like, you don't want to just rip everything apart and start over. It's like baby steps to get to where you want to get to in 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Like, all of us want these 7-figure deals, which, we all do. It makes sense. But the 7-figure deals come with a bunch of expectations that sometimes aren't just going to work. So our best clients have been the ones who started off a little smaller, but we got to those big deals because we did the right things along the way. Whereas some of our big deals on the front were so complex, and because they were multiple stakeholders, the expectations were so wildly different across a company, they were never going to win. And so the beauty of the small thing is you start to get everybody in line and sort of buy into that vision. Whereas if you come in super hot at the beginning, it's a real tough way to get everyone aligned if you don't get it perfect. And even perfection is very different in each stakeholder's eyes. And so it becomes a real challenge. So as much as I want my guys to go sell these massive deals, it's sometimes better that we don't, because it just gets the customer in a better spot.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely better to kind of start small and work your way up. So, I mean, along those lines, like at the end of the day, it is about driving results. Like, how do insights teams prove that their tech stack is actually meeting their goals? It's helping to drive decisions, or, helping to, find their success, however they might measure that.
That's a great question. So I think when it comes down to it, most insights professionals are measured on a couple things, right? Have they facilitate the right research? How is their budget looking across a year? Their head count. The beauty of research tech stacks is they should be solving a bunch of those challenges. So we've done some math, and basically Indecision itself costs around 9 full days of employees' time in any given year. If you add up the salaries in your group, that could be massive. When you think about the way traditional research might take 6 to 8 weeks, and sometimes you absolutely need that traditional research, but these automation plays that are 1 to 2 days, think of what you've just saved when it comes to time, right? And there's opportunity costs that sometimes can't be measured. So if you don't get into market in the next 2 weeks, but if your competitor does with the exact same thing, maybe you've lost a share, right? So what do you do there? So I think as an individual in a company, look at how you're measured. How's your company measured? What are the right KPIs that are going to work? And then how can you actually facilitate the research technology stack to do those types of things? So if you're measured on efficiency, if you're measured on managing revenue, if you're measured on customer acquisition or retention, you can line these things up accordingly, because if you get the research right or fast enough, you get extra customers, or you get more efficient, or you're saving a lot of headcount power in terms of waste. So those are easy to line up, but it's really important that you're talking to your research technology provider. If they don't know how to do that, that's a bit of a red flag, because that means they don't actually get the value prop of what they're doing. If they know how to do it, they can actually give you the map of what it's actually going to save you.
I think that, yeah, that's amazing. Like, knowing what those metrics are and being able to do the math, prove the success. And I'm so sorry.
I mean, it's so amazing, right? You've done a really good job. You're trying to keep straight. Like, I love it.
I'm really trying. I'm like, I wonder if anybody can hear this. We're having some emergency over there, of course. And that when I get off this call, he's gonna ignore me for 2 hours.
Makes sense.
100%. This is just because we're together. But anyways, being able to do the math and really quantify the success, I think is key. Oh my gosh. So, and moving right along, when it comes to picking that right technology, obviously we talked about maybe let's talk a little bit about what that long-term vision is, like, what is that? What do we need to consider when picking and implementing a new MR tech stack? Like, what is the end goal that we're looking to get to?
It's a great question. So we have a lot of companies who come to us for that exact same question. And the way I think about it is if you have a house and you have furniture, right? So you have all these different technologies. So think of like your video tool, your transcription tool, your qualitative tool, your research management tool, your research knowledge management piece. There's all these different things that happen. So what do you do with them though? You have to connect them somehow. So part of what you need to figure out as a company is what is going to resonate the most with your internal stakeholders. And for a lot of folks, that might be a qual tool first, right? So it could be something like a Vox Pop Me video piece or something like we have, like a Chris chatbot. If you can get these things into play and show some resonance that there's some value there and they start to see the power of it, that's your first piece. Then what's your next piece? What's going to bring value after that? But the biggest thing to think about is you don't want to have 10 different technologies with 10 different logins, because each time you bring a new piece of technology into your company, you have change management that you have to figure out. Are they going to actually use it? Are they going to want to try it? Are they going to log in every single day and actually become habit? That's a real tough thing. So what we've tried to figure out with a lot of companies is how can you build a house on top of that to put them all together? What if you only had one single sign login? So part of what your vision has to look like is user experience, right? If you make it difficult, people will have a difficult time trying to use your technology and use it all the time. How do you make it super simple? So part of what you need to figure out over your sort of 3-year window, if we call it that, is ease of use, right? Technologies are great, but individually those are fine. But as a team, you need to figure out how you're going to connect them all together. So this idea of being agnostic and sort of API generation. And so companies like ours and a bunch of other ones will play connector and connect everybody up. That's a really important part as well. So you can have all these great different tools, but then how do you connect them all together? So I think companies like yours, Jen, for example, like it's such a fantastic thing, but it's only one part of the insights world. So how do we get broader? How do we think bigger? And if you think even further, research technology is now infringing on marketing tech, right? So if you think of the MarTech stack, think of like Adobe's and everybody else, it's so big, but it's going to sort of cross over. So now it's about not necessarily thinking about insights, but it's about marketing as well, because that function has become much more gray with the insights professional too. So you have a lot more stakeholders, a lot more folks to think about. So it's about really thinking about small steps and then mapping them out to your bigger goal. Because the more you get resonance in terms of those small wins, the more your CMO or your head of insights or your VP of marketing will give you more money to do this, because they want to get leaner. They want to get much more powerful when it comes to insights. Everyone says they're customer centric and the customer data first. Prove it. Put the money in. Do these types of things, right? You can only say that so many times if you do not have the systems to do it. And so I laugh at a lot of companies who want to say this, but actually don't live it, because you're not. You're not. And a lot of us in the industry actually know you're not. So you could tell that story, but we know you're not doing it. So instead, take these small wins, get on the board, and let's move the industry together, but slowly get the right things done first.
Yeah, I think that you bring up an interesting point too about, there's so many different people that need to get into these systems and need to, see the insights, see the results, see the data, that data transparency piece and making it available to so many different people is a big challenge. And the change management piece, I think, is something that a lot of insights providers have really struggled with recently. And this, as you talk through it, first roll this out. This is the most important thing to your business. Then you need to think about, now we're going to have to train people and change their behavior again. This is overwhelming. How do we make this simpler? And, I guess the login piece is one way to do that, but, I'm sure there's other ways too, to make sure that you're making it as easy as possible for, to roll this stuff out internally and actually get people to adopt the usage.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It comes down to things like governance, or things like how do you build a system that allows people to view things who might not be an insights professional, but can have access to insights, right? And I think if the idea for us as an industry is to get insights more proliferated and more ubiquitous across the industry to everybody who can possibly access insights, we have to create tools that allow for that. And so this idea of governance has become super important when it's as simple as saying, they're a marketer. We can box something up and they can run it if they want because we've already approved it. Or they're a marketer. They can look at the data, but they can't shape the data. But we allow them to play in that exact sandbox, because sometimes what I think as an industry, our disservice is we make it seem so difficult to get in. And so now it makes it even more difficult for folks to even want to play. And now we want to all say we want to get a seat everywhere else. Well, we cause our own problem. So now we have to break down those barriers for us to get back out there to connect with everybody else. And this idea of research technology can allow us to do that if we open it up just enough and have some guardrails for some folks to play in a very specific way. So that will allow for more of these sort of wins or stakeholders to say, you know what, we believe in this, or we want to do this, or we want to invest in this. And that's a big difference, because a lot of these CMOs control the budget. The only way to let them believe in you is to let them play with it, to see the power of it. So, it's as simple as that. I think sometimes we get in our own way around how to get this, because we believe we are the kings of the castle when it comes to data. Data is everywhere for everyone right now. And we have to own that, and we have to know that, and we have to empower them versus blocking them.
Yeah. Well, because to your point, like when we block the data that we do have and the insights that we do have, that is what causes people to go out and get it themselves and, explore the technology, because the technology is so fast and so agile and reasonably priced and DIY. Anybody who's not a researcher can use it from a functional perspective, which is, again, one of the things that creates a lot of fear in the insight space. So to your point, if we can make it more available and be more transparent about what the insights teams are capturing, then there's no need to do that. There's no need for me as a marketer to go out and run my own research anymore. I'm going to go to my insights team.
That's exactly it. And then you wonder why these guys bang their head on the wall when people use SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics or companies like ours or Zapier or anybody else. Well, you create the problem. Like, we need to be more open around what we do and how we can share that data, because otherwise they're going to go outside. And if we want to have more of a holistic look at data, we have to be on the same page. And I think a lot of the challenges around why research tech is really bubbling the last 24 months, particularly because of COVID and people needed other ways to look at things. But it's because more and more people are looking to buy access to get insights from their customers. And the only way for a company to play together is to look at that holistically. Your marketers, your product folks, your dev folks, your insights folks have to be on the same page around what data means to your company and what the power is. And if we can get everyone in the industry to look at that way, it changes the questions and the commentary when it comes to investing in research technology and how it's important and understanding how to stack these things. But one of the basic things we have to fight first is, what does data mean to your company and who's going to use it? And if we can get past that as an industry to everybody, and that tent becomes that much bigger, a lot of these questions about things like budget go away. And so it's, how do we tell that story, not just the insight story?
Yeah, completely. So my one last question for you is, as we're talking about all different kind of types of tech out there, we've been kind of focused on methodology and like how we're, solving different business challenges and getting the right insights and things like that. What about, sourcing the people, right? Like, how is that changing, and how we recruit for our studies, how we get the right people, how we, are representative, but at the same time targeted. Like, there's been so many developments in the recruitment space as well from a tech perspective. Like, what have you seen in your kind of experience there?
Well, it's a great question. So I came up in the data collection industry. So I've worked at Open Venue, Research Now, Asking Canadians, which is part of our brand as well. So I've been lucky to see a lot of that side. It is wild west at this point, and I think it's the challenge right now is, what's the value back to a consumer to give feedback? And I think we have undercut them for such a long time. A couple bucks to sort of get some feedback is sort of wild when you're making multi-million-dollar decisions on these people's opinions, right? So. And you wonder why it's very difficult to get people to answer questions. So you're seeing a lot more different types of panels. So you have the double opt-in traditionals, right? And then you have these sort of like dynamic panels that are happening. But what we've learned is that there's not going to be just one single source to solve any problem. You're going to have to mix a lot of these panels up to solve different things, because folks just aren't answering the exact same way. Response rates, while they've managed themselves, they're not what they used to be. I mean, when I was in the industry, when I started, it was like 40%, which is insane. Now you're lucky to get 5%. So the challenge right now is, as a corporate brand or as a full service market research firm, you have to be okay with multi-panel approaches. You have to be okay with sometimes the price being a little different, especially during COVID, because people just aren't answering the exact same way. And then it comes back to the quality of your survey. So if it's if they have to have things like video, which are so dynamic, versus these sort of long scales, which aren't. If you're a consumer, because these people are consumers, what would you rather do? So I think we need to relook at things like the way we ask our questions. What are we expecting back from the respondent? And also as companies, being okay with multi-approach, because the world is changing. The way we consume data is changing. The way people are giving feedback is changing. You're going to have to go with the times and not just look at the actual traditional way it's been happening. So be open to change. Understand the way you consume data, or your parents or your kids or whatever. It is very different. So that's going to be the big change, which I think is going to be interesting to see how panels adapt in the future. And particularly what I think is going to be interesting is going to be, you're going to see more of these sort of passive data captures and these sort of randomly 1 or 2 questions about why you did something. So we do everything on our mobile phones now anyways. So instead of asking 20 or 30 questions in a traditional survey, what if I just poked you 1 or 2 times based on what you did or didn't do? And I think that'll be much more, it'll resonate a lot more with consumers, but it's going to be much more profound for marketers and insights professionals, because you're asking the exact question you need. A lot of times we ask 1,000 questions of fluff sometimes that don't add a ton of stuff, but stakeholders want from here, want to add extra questions, right? So this becomes much more powerful, because then the user says, look, I answered the question. I gave you my exact feedback in that moment. That's really all I need to do. It's a good trade. Right now, the trade seems a little bit off.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think in some ways, sometimes the survey questions that we ask haven't caught up with the fact that we're capturing all this behavioral data that we never had before.
That's right.
10 years ago, we had to ask, when was the last time you purchased from X store? We don't have to ask that anymore, because we have that somewhere else. We know, because you've got a loyalty card or you've got an account on the website. So by asking that question, you're wasting their time, because we already know the answer. We haven't yet caught up to that. So to your point about I make a purchase online, you don't need to ask me that I've made a purchase. You know that already, but you want to know why. What drove that purchase? Or how did I get there? Why did I decide to shop at that store instead of another store? And so those more, again, faster, more iterative questions and survey moments are important, and intercepting them at the right moment, as opposed to these hour-long 1,000-question surveys that just don't serve us anymore.
And it's this idea of actionable data, right? And I think even from a consumer point of view, how many times have you got an email from a company when you've already bought the product saying, oh, look, we found this exact same thing you like? Well, dude, I already bought the product. I did exactly what you want me to do. Now you're sending me emails about the exact same thing, which makes zero sense. So part of the problem is, as an industry, how do we make data more actionable, but in the moment? And I think we haven't figured that part out. And to your point, how do we connect? So things like CRM data to research data to marketing data right then and there. So part of, I think, what you're going to see in the next 10 years is more of these connectors between big data aggregators that are like loyalty programs, and then research folks, and tying that back into survey, because you're going to have some sort of sequential play in terms of what data is doing and when. We haven't figured that out as an industry. No one really owns that. So you're going to see these big data partnerships, I think, that are just the industry is going to buy into, let's say, on a more agnostic way to kind of look at data, versus us doing surveys about every single thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that is the big question mark in the industry right now, is what's going to tie all of that stuff together. Yeah. And the companies that I've seen do it really well are building those DMPs internally, because everyone's needs are so different. There isn't a one size fits all solution. So it's hey, I'm X brand. I'm going to build this internally to suit my needs, because I've got different types of data that I care about than this other brand does. But that is still a big kind of black box at the moment, it seems.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, because the folks who could do it, with the Apples and the Googles, I mean, they're going to get crushed by anyone who has legislation against all the data stuff, right? So as much as we salivate to get it right, there's a lot of folks who, can be pretty terrifying if you get it in the wrong hands. So I think there's a balance a bit to figure out. But if anyone's going to do it, I'd put my money on one of these big guys to kind of figure it out. So
yeah, if they care enough to try.
Care enough to try.
Well, I cannot thank you enough. This conversation has been amazing.
Always amazing with you, Jen. Always
amazing. I'm really glad you came on today. Thank you so much. And thanks for your patience with my distractions here. We powered through.
Appreciate it, Jen. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you on the next episode next week.